Hi, I'm Michelle Shingler, the editor-in-chief of Foreword Reviews, and you're tuning into Petit Forward, our bite-sized interviews with indie authors. Today, we're speaking with Kapka Kassabova, whose latest book, Elixer, released on May 16th. It's the vibrant, beautiful story of a singular, remarkable place, and it issues a call to reclaim the physical, emotional, and spiritual connection between humanity and the natural world. Kapka, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
It's a pleasure. Hi.
Hi. You write that when a village loses its earth experts, it becomes an empty place. You saw this in the Mesta Valley, where so few herbalists and foragers remain, and you've seen it in the Scottish Highlands, where you now live as well. What is the remedy to such emptying?
Well, I think some of that depends on the context and depends on the history of the emptying and the denaturing and the depeopling. One thing that surprised me, it was maybe it's not a discovery, maybe it's not a new thing for naturalists and for anthropologists, but during this journey in the Mesta Valley, I kind of understood how peopling and wilding, as well as depeopling and de-wilding, sometimes actually are not opposites, but they go together sometimes. And so I suppose what the process that led to the empty village syndrome and this kind of empty landscape, which for better or for worse is left to itself to kind of do its thing, has been quite different in the Scottish Highlands from what I saw in the setting of this book. And in the Scottish Highlands, it's been going on for longer. It started with the Highland clearances in the 18th and 19th centuries. In Bulgaria, in the Mesta Valley, it's been a very recent thing because industrialization arrived there very late. In fact, that region hasn't been industrialized at all in the sense of big industry or heavy industry or sort of non-organic industry. So what's happened there has happened really in the last 2 generations. And it was really caused by a series of linked events. First of all, the nationalization of land and livestock in the early years of the communist regime. So that's the late 40s, early 50s. And then a generation later, with the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, there was a kind of privatization, which was the inverse process, which was just as disastrous, but in a different way. It was followed by mass migration. So this emptying began of people and animals leaving, disappearing, and globalization. So that people today, if you go there now, you will find these sort of semi-empty villages where most of the young people, turn up maybe for the summer or for the winter, but the rest of the time they're probably working somewhere in Western Europe, doing something land related. These people are traditionally land experts. So either working with animals or picking berries or working in poultry factories in Britain and France, because of this great inequity of labor and income within Europe itself. So I think the remedy is really to well, look at the economics, obviously, of local economics, job opportunities, de-gangsterizing the economy, and this kind of gangsterization, this capture of the economy is the result again of this rabid national privatization that happened in the 90s, corporatization of land and livelihoods. Yeah. So it's a manifold problem, and I think the remedies are not necessarily as complex, but we just need new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things.
Yeah. Thank you. So you also note that the herbs and mushrooms and medicinal plants that people are gathering in the Mesta Valley, people buy them in other nations, and they're expensive by the time they reach Scotland or somewhere else in Europe. But the initial foragers make very little for their work, and it depends on this vanishing expertise. Is there a better way to support people at that local level who are doing the hard work of finding and harvesting plants?
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, it is a paradoxical thing that, you know, I can walk out my door here in Scotland and all the plants are here. All the plants that I saw being harvested in great quantities in the wild in the Mesta Valley, which then end up in my nearest deli with a high price tag, down a long chain of supply, starting with the harvesters themselves, the pickers who make almost no money at all, to the wholesale buyers. And there are stories of wholesale buyers and what their lives are like. And these are all village people, you know, people who have this really in their blood. You know, they're part of this, really of humanity's lineage of foraging and working with leaf, you know, and mushroom. And I love it how people, you know, people in that region refer to, or the people who work with plants refer to plants in the singular. You know, I'm going for mushroom today. you know, I'm going for blueberry, because it's a kind of being, it's an entity, you know. So it's a long chain of supply, and obviously the, you know, the top of the chain is where all the profit is made. And we as a customer, you know, as a buyer, we are the final link in that chain. I mean, in a way, you know, this kind of outsourcing of labor, which is what we're talking about here, is a result of all the iniquities of globalization, but also the hidden inequalities of what seems perhaps from the outside to be a united or a kind of more or less fairly managed continent that is Europe. But within Europe, you know, there are different universes and different livelihoods. And I think there needs to be more honesty, you know, looking at this. These people are hidden, you know, that's why I guess I end up writing about hidden people on the periphery, the so-called periphery. Of course, if you spend long enough in a periphery, this is a geopolitical periphery, you discover that it's in fact the center. It is the center of its own universe. And if you look at it in terms of what nourishes us, it is the center. You know, the Mesta region is one of the last unspoiled series of ecosystems, or relatively unspoiled, in Europe. And the Western Balkans, where this is in the Central Balkans in Bulgaria, has some of the last wild rivers in Europe. In fact, the only remaining wild rivers in Europe. And that says something about the state of ecology there, and the potential. So really, as a literary writer, rather than a whistleblower, you know, I hope that my writing will actually open up this world to readers and people who are interested in these chains of supply, to actually see what's going on the ground, where our food comes from.
You do such a beautiful job of honoring everyone in the center of that chain. So I think you've accomplished that. You mentioned this already, but after your time in the Mesta Valley, you came home to Scotland and you realized that some of the prized plants that you'd been introduced to in Bulgaria were growing right outside your door. So how do people who want to do this same sort of natural discovery at home get started?
Well, the way I started was from, you know, with practical curiosity. You know, I think the ancients said it. There are three ways to learn in this world: through books, with a guide or mentor, and through direct experience, unguided. The first method is the worst because it's theoretical.
Mm.
And the second is the best, because it combines the best of both worlds, the practical and the theoretical background. And so I think we just start as we can in our places, and it has to come back. It really seems that experience is the key to kind of changing our mindsets, our attitudes, even our way of being, in our places. You know, you don't have to go to the Mesta Valley to discover plants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're growing outside your door, even in a city. You know, the weeds are the plants we are talking about. You know, the humble dandelion
Yeah.
is one of these plants, with an old medicinal history. So I think we just start in the most direct way possible, according to our places and what we have at hand. And I guess in some places like the Mesta region, it's much easier to find an experienced forager,
Mm.
because these people are still there on the ground, still connected. There is an unbroken connectedness there. But you know, even in a city, you can find, you know, you can find someone who is connected with what's beyond, you know, beyond, I guess, the mainstream, or what seems, what is on the surface. So perhaps the key here is experience, starting with, and for me, you know, this journey with plants really starts in childhood. It kind of reached the point of maturation now in my 40s, but really I've been interested in the edible earth since I was a child, going out foraging with my grandmother, or seeing how my auntie plants things in her garden and then turns them into something wonderful in the kitchen, you know, which is what an alchemist does, you know, an alchemist. And this is one of the you know, one of the guiding sort of narrative sort of threads in the book, the alchemy of things, you know, transforming something from earth, or from base matter, to something magical and potentially life-changing. And I think plants have the power to do that. Because the earth has the power to do that for us. It does it every day.
Yeah. So you just mentioned alchemy. In your book, you talk about alchemists. There's that beautiful chapter where you remind your audience that alchemists had to be students of many subjects. They weren't just doing one thing. Their education was holistic. And you suggest that radical curiosity was at the root of their magic. So how do we cultivate that same curiosity in a world where we often feel cut off from magic, but our body earth memory still knows it's there? We just feel like a little cut off.
Sure. I think we come back to this need now to kind of take charge of our bodies and our minds and our daily lives ourselves. That, you know, I mean, this is one of the big things in the book that really accompanied me, this idea that, and the realization as I did my research into the history of healing and botanical medicine, that really all the great pioneers in this area, like Paracelsus and Avicenna, of course, you know, these are the forefathers and mothers. Hildegard of Bingen, the great German mystic and nun, foremothers of modern medicine, indicated this empowerment, self-empowerment, through knowledge and direct experience, and finding the right teachers, you know, connecting to the right kind of sources to empower ourselves about our health, about our world, and to a large extent, you know, the dominant institutions in Western civilization, which has been patriarchal for the last 2,000 years, disconnect us from that. They take away a lot of our power, in the same way that, you know, all the industrial enterprises of the military industrial complex that drives, you know, our system still has disconnected us from nature. Heavy industry, super urbanization, it has denatured us. And I think we're all kind of beginning to wake up to the fact that to survive, we need to find ways find ways, just look for ways to reconnect to what's alive.
Thank you. So you met with Babas in the Mesta, you witnessed miracles there, you were invited into ancient rituals. What memories do you treasure most from your time there, and what, if anything, has folded into your practice?
Oh, it completely changed my my life. I mean, I think every real journey, you know, in a way, this is a kind of pilgrimage into nature. You know, the book does have scenes of magic and rituals, but they're all really about the same thing: the relationship that people have with place, and with the fruits of that place, with the beings of that place, human and more than human beings. And I think really the most powerful thing, apart from learning lots about plants and history, because there is a rich human history in this region. I think the lesson, or the really the most humbling kind of thing that I witnessed and took away is the power of humanity. You know, the power to, and this is, I think, the greatest kind of act of magic and alchemy. How people can transform their suffering into something that shines. And you know, almost every character in the book has been through trauma of one kind or another: political trauma, personal, economic hardships, all sorts of injustices. And how to work with our suffering, with our pain, that I think is perhaps the deepest kind of lesson of this journey for me. And it's a lesson that we can tap into by tapping into nature, really.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And it was such a treat to spend time with your book. I hope everyone goes and picks it up. It's out on shelves now. Just a reminder to our audiences. Thank you so much, Kapka, for taking time to speak with us. And I hope no one misses these magical pages.